You are listening to the audio portion of the QB Power Hour webinar series. The QB Power Hour is a free biweekly webinar series for accounting professionals presented by Michelle Long and Dan DeLong, who are very passionate about the industry, QuickBooks, and apps that integrate with QuickBooks. You can find out all the details about the webinar series at qbpowerhour.com. So without further ado, here's Michelle and Dan.
All right. We have a great day today on the QB Power Hour, as we are preparing for year-end with a special guest keeper today. So we're very glad to have you joining us for another QB Power Hour. So thank you all for being here. My name is Michelle Long. I'm a CPA and MBA in entrepreneurship, the owner of Long for Success. Been a trainer for Intuit for a very long time. So I'm very glad to have you guys joining us. And speaking of Intuit, I am very busy today because it is the VCon with new updated content on the certifications. We got the QuickBooks certification, advanced cert, as well as the payroll cert going on today. And with that said, we have thousands of people over there, and I am helping with that. So I am doing double duty today. But it is, like I mentioned, new content. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to drop the link for that in case you all are interested. If you can attend that, just remember to go ahead and register, because the recordings will be available after the event, as well as all the handouts, which are great resources. They have supplemental guides for the advanced certification, all those handouts as well. So you can register, watch the recordings later. It's free CPE. If you're a CPA and you need CPE for the end of the year, go ahead and register. You can only get CPE if you attend live. Also, there is a tax VCon that's coming up January 10th and 11th. We'll put that in the link there. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be doing some Q&A for that as well as this. So I'm going to go ahead and take my video off, and I'm going to be multitasking and doing Q&A on both. So I'm going to be listening to you all and monitoring and listening and everything. And I've given Dan a few things to share. So I will be attending and listening in the background. But special thanks to Chad and Joshua and Keeper for joining us today. But I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off. But thank you, everybody. And I'll put those links in the Q&A. If you need anything, put it in the Q&A, and I'll be listening in the background. So thanks, everybody. And thanks, Dan, for all you do. Thanks, you guys.
All right. Well, thanks for doing the double duty today. In true fashion, you're able to multitask in multiple places. So my name is Dan DeLong, owner at Danwith. I worked out Intuit for nearly 18 years to co-host today. Also the co-host over at Workshop Wednesdays at Schoolofbookkeeping.com is doing the tech editing for the QBO for Dummies series. Joining us today are a couple guests from Keeper. Keeper, if you don't know, I don't want to steal any of your thunder with regards to Keeper, and we'll talk a little bit about Keeper near the end. But Chad, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Dan and Michelle, for having us. Really excited to be here and share a little bit on Keeper, especially the ways that it's going to help with the year-end process and review. My name's Chad. I'm one of the account executives here at Keeper. So I have the privilege of sharing the Keeper with firms all over the country every single day. But before that, I come from a long history in public accounting, where I was a partner and director of client accounting services. So understand the pain points that many of us are going through this time of year.
Awesome. And Josh?
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. Dan, thanks for having us on. Really excited to be here. As you can see by the slide, I focus on partnership marketing at Keeper, but not too dissimilar to Chad. I started my career as a CPA myself at KPMG. I focused on transaction advisory and strategy out in New York, and have now moved into the ops marketing space and based in Denver, Colorado. So excited to be back in the accounting and bookkeeping industry where I started my career.
Fantastic. Thanks again for joining us as we'll get into what Keeper actually can and does do. Year-end activities or month-end bookkeeping activities and processes is really up in the main lane of what Keeper does. So appreciate you joining us here today. So some of the details about the QB Power Hour webinars, they're every other Tuesday at 12 Eastern. They aren't eligible for CPE credit, so stop asking me. Check the website for upcoming events and the options like this. We'll put the tax VCon and those types of things well on there as well. But if you do need the PDFs of the slides, recordings, podcasts, and other resources, we do have qbpowerhour.com/resources as a one-stop shop there for you. But I will put in the chat and on the streaming platforms that we're putting things the link for today's resources as well. A little bit of the housekeeping. If you do have specific questions about the topics that we're talking about today, please put them in the Q&A, because that certainly makes it easier for us to follow up if it's not something that we can answer live on the web. If you do have general comments or just regular chatty types of things like hello, Michelle, or those types of things, please put them in the chat as opposed to the Q&A. And then, of course, we have the resources there as far as the handouts and links, as well as the webinar archive as well. Now, we are trying something new today. If we are investigating a new streaming platform that allows us to expand the channels that we're putting things. So we are actually live on YouTube as well as Facebook. And if you are joining us or you are happening to see it from Facebook, we'll ultimately want to put this in the Facebook group that we have for the QB Power users group. And that is going to require, in order for us to see who you are and engage with the conversation, it's something you have to acknowledge as far as the platform and and Facebook, because Facebook needs permission to do anything. And you'll be able, in order to see who you are. Otherwise, it just shows up as Facebook user, so we can address you as you. So if you are seeing it from there, say hi, and then we'll see if we can actually see you. All right. So our agenda today is talking all about the QuickBooks Online Accountant cleanup and year end. So we'll talk a little bit about cleaning up lists, reports, writing off invoices, reclassifying transactions, the books review, and fixing undeposited funds, preparing 1099s, which is always fun, and then prepping for taxes. Now, and then we'll segue into Keeper can help out with those types of things. And we've done these year-end checklists and those types of things in the past before. A lot of times we've dived. I don't know the word. We've gone into more detail and demonstrated these sort of things. And in the essence of time, we will reference those prior webinars that we've done a little deeper dive, or if we have a different video to share with you there. So in the essence of time here today. All right. So we'll start off with our first poll question, which is on there we go. Okay. And there we go. Okay. It was out of order when I set up the poll question. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't launching the wrong poll question. So do you wait until year end to clean up your client's books, or maybe do you do things recurring, right, throughout the week? Now, Dad, you're a bona fide CPA. What was your take on doing those kinds of tasks? Do you wait until the year end, or do you find that it's better if you take those things routinely?
Yeah, we made the move for a lot of the firms that I've been a part with to moving away from the year-end cleanup only and trying to get those recurring accounting and bookkeeping services all year long. So that way we could spread that work throughout the year, stay on top of it. So that way the team isn't crushed by the already crazy busy season. So definitely trying to spread it out throughout the year.
Right. That seems like a good mindset. And as I'm looking at the polls coming in here, I'm just going to close the poll in a few seconds and then share the results. It looks like that is a common thread. Yes, about 86% do routine tasks throughout the year. So that's a great mindset to be in, so that you don't get the aha surprise at the end of the year, which could really cause a challenge. Now, before we get into the year end, I do want to talk a little bit about, and I do mean a little bit, about the Intuit announcement that was last week. I think it was last Thursday, about QuickBooks Desktop. So we're talking about year end. Some people think that is life ending, right? When we talk about what's happening with Desktop. So there was a stop sell date announcement, which will be 7/31 of 24. And we want to talk a little bit about what that means, and we'll unpack that a little bit. So new subscriptions are going to be, there's going to be a stop sell for Intuit. So they won't sell new subscriptions with regards to Pro, Premier, and the Plus subscription model, right? Which is with 2021 discontinuing in May, then all desktop versions of Pro Premier, either Windows or Mac, will be on a subscription model. So they will stop selling new subscriptions on 7/31. Why is that date significant? Because that is into its end of fiscal year, right? So that is the date that they're actually going to stop selling. So I was considering how this would actually show up for people. Like if they're going to stop selling on 7/31, what if somebody buys a subscription 7/30, right? That's an annual subscription. How are they going to get the most use out of that annual subscription? Because they are annual. And if you look at the Firm of the Future article, I've linked it down here at the bottom. There are asterisks, and I try to mimic that on this slide. There's asterisks all over, and they have a disclaimer down at the bottom that says availability, terms, condition, pricing, special features, service, and support options subject to change without notice. They threw that disclaimer throughout the entire article, which makes people think, right? They make people think, what does that actually mean for me and my clients who are on desktop? So my wife and I, who both worked at Intuit for double-digit years, were having a powwow about it. And we were, what does this mean, right? What could this mean for the end of and discontinuation of desktop? Because they've really set the stage here. And so my thinking was, okay, what if somebody buys an annual subscription before the stop sell date? How do they get the most out of that year? And what would Intuit potentially do mid-year, right? So my thinking is that, and this is just based off of the history of what I've seen Intuit do in the past. No, I don't have any authority as far as what is actually going to happen, but this is what I think is going to happen, is that they'll stop selling on 7/31. And I think there's going to be a grace period during that next year. They'll probably make some announcement after that stop sell date as far as what the plans are. And that may be coming in the fall because that's when they will roll out 2025 or new versions of QuickBooks Desktop as far as what would happen. My guess is that they're going to give a grace period of, this is your last year on this subscription. We'll honor and support that until the end of that subscription. And then for a variety of people that are spread out throughout that year, those people will cease to be renewed. So that, I think that's what the coming year is going to present to us with regards to what is the plan for QuickBooks Desktop on the Pro and Premier side. Now, a new Enterprise and Intuit has claimed that Enterprise is the desktop product of choice. Moving forward, I don't think there will be any changes regarding Enterprise, but with the Pro, Premier, and payroll, those types of things, I think that is going to be that. So with that, if you do have to continue the discussion about what this potentially means or what this means to you, please continue this discussion in the Facebook group. Now, we don't want to have multiple or duplicate posts about this, so I'm trying to consolidate them back into the Firm of the Future post that Michelle had shared with to continue that lively discussion. All right. So going back into the topic of the day, let's talk about cleaning up or prepping for year end. So cleaning up lists is a great place to start because that is the foundation of the QuickBooks company files, the chart of accounts, customers, vendors, product and services, and adjusting the account mappings. So a lot of people that I've talked to forget that you can merge some of these list elements. Important to note though, in QuickBooks Online, you're not actually, when you do merge, unlike desktop, when you merge a chart of account or a customer or a vendor, that combines all of the transactions under that list element. But in QuickBooks Online, those are actually, you never actually can delete something. So in desktop, when you merge things, they actually do get combined and the two become one. Whereas in online, it automatically inactivates the one that you're merging from, calls it deleted, whatever it is. And then the merge to it inherits all of the transactions. So it ultimately does do the same purpose. but you end up having an inactive list element. Even though there's no transactions to it, there's not anything that anyone can do about deleting that unused list element, but it is going to be there and hidden. So you won't see it. What's the word I'm looking for? Clogging up your lists by those views by being active. In your products and services, always make sure that your account mappings are correct. And there is a tricky checkbox. When you do change the product and service accounts that things are pointing to, it shows up after you've made the change and it doesn't show, it's not an alert or anything like that. It'll say, would you like to update historical transactions? It's a checkbox. A lot of people miss it because it's right below, it's positioned right below the drop down of the account that you're changing it to. So you don't see it. Your eyes directly go to the save button, you miss it, and then it doesn't update historical transactions like you hoped for. And that causes a challenge or a phone call or chat to all because of a little checkbox. So you just want to make sure that if you are modifying that, do that, see that checkbox show up and put it in there, and then it will do historical transactions. Does not do that for inventory items. However, as long as they are items service-based or non-inventory parts, that will be for that. Reviewing the reports, reconciling most balance sheet accounts, looking for unusual balances like a negative savings account, ensure undeposited fundings is clearing out, and then tying opening balance equity to zero. Chad, what is your philosophy or thoughts about opening balance equity? That's like the QuickBooks under the carpet account as far as like creating those types of things. What has your experience been like or thoughts about? And I'm always interested in outsiders' opinions about, about opening balance equity.
It's a great call out on this list, Dan, because it does create so many headaches and surprises at year end where you go to prepare for the tax return at the end of the year. And then all of a sudden there's an opening balance in that equity account that you didn't expect. So definitely would reiterate the recommendation here. Make sure that's adjusted to zero. If there's a balance there, certainly investigate to understand where it came from, because there's likely going to be an issue.
Very good. Very good. And then retained earnings is always a good balance sheet account to look for. You don't want to be entering in transactions into retained earnings unless you have the C, the P, and the A at the end of your name, or had been advised to by those people. The QuickBooks automatically at the end of your fiscal year, whatever that year actually is, take your net income and move it to retained earnings for you. So you don't have to make those entries on your client's behalf, but you do want to make sure that if there is activity in there, that it's supposed to be in there. And then reviewing activity in accounts like maybe they incorrectly entered in transaction type, like sales tax payments, they wrote a check, or there's nothing posted to loan balances and they've made these payments. Maybe they show up in your profit and loss as all expense types of transactions. So writing off the invoices is another year-end activity that a lot of people will end up doing. QuickBooks Online write-off tool isn't recommended when sales tax is involved, the invoice is in a closed period, or you're on an accrual basis. The reason being is that when you do use the write-off invoices tool, what it does is it discounts the original invoice. So when that invoice is in last year or in another closed period, that's when it's going to be impacting the bad debt or whatever account that you're writing things off to. So and their sales tax is going to be skewed as well. QuickBooks Online is now giving you, if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of, I think it's a dry humor message where it says, this is like oil and water or something like that, where you're modifying a transaction in a period that should potentially be closed, especially when there's sales tax involved. This could be one of those things that triggers that. We do have a workshop link here about AR cleanup that you can check that out over at School of Bookkeeping. But when you have those issues of the sales tax or it's in a closed period or you're on an accrual basis, what you want to do in QuickBooks Online is use credit memos instead. Instead of using the write-off tool, use a credit memo because it will allow you to be a little bit more explicit on the dates when you're recognizing the expense of the bad debt. You would add a service or non-inventory item, post that bad debt expense account. And then a little tip there of turning off automatically apply credit so that it doesn't arbitrarily go and change an invoice or write off an invoice by you creating that credit. But you create the credit memo and then manually apply that through the receipt payment screen or manually applying that however you prefer, right? Reclassifying transactions. So this is a great tool to use when you see, like when merging doesn't work, right? Like when you can't merge accounts, but you can move accounts. You can use the reclassify tool. We did have a workshop on reclassifying transactions over at School of Bookkeeping, so we check that out as well. But some of the things that can't be reclassified, products and services, the items, the accounts that are, so if you have an invoice that's pointing to an incorrect service account or income service or revenue account, you can't reclassify the account there. You can do class and locations, but you're not unable to do the actual account if there is an item on the transactions. That's where you want to go back to the products and service item and make sure that check mark is checked off. And then expenses, the payment account or the bank or the credit card. You cannot change the source of the account of where it came from. Deposits and sales receipts, that's also, again, the source of the bank account that it's posting to. Those deposit to accounts can't be changed in the reclassification tool. And then inventory adjustments, billed expenses, payroll transactions, all of that. The account can't be changed because those are special types of transactions, and you'll need to manage those in another fashion. All right. So talking about the books review, this is a relatively newish tool that's in QBOA. It's a lot of people didn't even realize that there is a drop down here to change that from setup to cleanup. And then that brings up a lot of different tools. And we've had a variety of other QB Power Hours where Michelle does demonstrate that a little bit deeper. But I also want to leave that for Keeper. Hey, no pun intended, poet there. I need to rhyme. But this is one of the things that I really wanted Josh and Chad to really drive up to the surface, because when I first heard about Keeper, the way that it was positioned is the books review handles a lot of these tasks that they were saying that they do, but there's a lot more to Keeper than what you can see in the books review, and hopefully we'll be able to unpack that a little bit with Josh and Chad. Fixing undeposited funds is, I think this is a Sisyphusian type of activity, because it seems like you're always pushing that boulder back up the undeposited funds hill. First off is, people don't understand what undeposited funds account is, and that there's some special transaction or special functionality tied to undeposited funds. The only things that you can do, bringing things in and taking things out. So a lot of times people live in the bank feed and they'll throw deposits into revenue. Meanwhile, their invoices and payments are posting into undeposited funds. Now, to that end, QuickBooks has, in its infinite wisdom, has changed the name of undeposited funds to a more aptly named payments to deposit, which makes a little bit more sense than the non-accountant. But of course, now the accountants that are used to undeposited funds are looking for, where's the undeposited funds account called payments to deposit now. Michelle has a great video on cleaning up the undeposited funds because you want to be able to unrecognize revenue or duplicated revenue, because your invoices are pointing to revenue and that these deposits are also pointing to revenue. You'll be able to basically swap out the payment with the deposit in the add funds to deposit. And she has a great video on that where it doesn't impact your reconciliation. Great idea. All right. So we're going to throw up the next poll, which is, what do you like most about the books review? So Chad, what do you like the most about books review?
Yeah, so I think one of the most common uses for books review, at least for my firm, before we discovered Keeper, was the identification of transactions without vendors or payees. Because you can use the reclassify tool in QBOA and reclassify in bulk transactions to different accounts, but you couldn't edit the payee from within that same tool. And so that required the team to then either change those one by one or subsequently discovered the books review and the option to edit those payees in bulk there, which also happens to be available in Keeper. So prior to Keeper, I'd say the the transactions without vendors and payees.
Got it. Got it. And I just realized I threw up the wrong poll question. So I'm going to let this one sit for a little bit, and then I'll throw up the right poll question. We'll ask that one while we're going through the 1099 topics as well. So we'll go ahead and end that one. And this was part of the challenge about what happened with the poll questions. They put them in a different launching pattern here. Let me end that poll and then launch yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's backwards, like they're labeled wrong. So this is why I need Miguel at the same time. All right, so preparing 1099. And Chad and Josh and I had a pretty good discussion as we were talking about this, about the preparation part of 1099s is a little bit different than the actual doing the 1099s. Making sure that that information is correct is just as important as the task of actually doing it in January. We have a couple articles there from Intuit about, setting up the box 7 non-employee compensation. Of course, in a couple, in 2 years ago when they brought back the 1099 NEC form and the support for it inside of QuickBooks. So there are potentially 2 different 1099s to prepare, one for non-employee compensation and another for all the other things like rent proceeds and the fishing boat, something or other. And when I worked at Intuit, it was all about box 7, which is the non-employee compensation. But there are other things to report on the 1099s, but it's not 1099K and it's not 1099 div and it's not 1099 INT forms that it supports. It's just that 1099 miscellaneous or non-employee compensation that it will support. Now, the big thing is about that 1099K is that some payments are going to be excluded on the 1099. So reportable payments that are eligible for 1099s are bank transactions. So cash, check, direct deposit, electronic funds transfer, but reportable payments, credit card, debit card, PayPal, Stripe, Square. I think Venmo is now entering into this issue as well, but they're going to be getting a 1099K from the credit card or merchant account provider, and that will be segregated out. So if you pay people by those things, you want to make sure that those are excluded. Otherwise, again, they may be overstating their revenue as far as what's being reported to the federal government, and then that would cause a nasty letter, which you don't want to be on the receiving end of that. And then the prep for taxes, which is, go ahead.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to pop in there and add on the 1099, something new this year. I just answered a question on it with the 1099. In the past, the corrected ones, you couldn't file a corrected 1099 in QBO. This was mentioned on the M&O webinar a couple of months ago. I think it might have been September too. But this year, and you look up the rules from the IRS, because I don't remember the details, but this year, if you e-filed your 1099, if you have a corrected one, you have to file the corrected 1099 the same way you originally filed it. So in the past, you couldn't e-file a corrected one through QBO, but this year that has changed because the IRS rules change. Pay attention to what the new rules from the IRS are. Go take a look at that. Go watch the previous M&O webinars, and just be aware that this year you can do corrected 1099s with QBO if you originally e-filed with QBO. Sorry. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes. So always check out the In the Know webinar to keep updated on what's new, which I think we were talking a little earlier that the Prep for Taxes In the Know webinar as well. Prep for Taxes. This is a great way to be able to send your QBO data, client's data to a tax preparation software. Michelle and Josh and Chad run screaming from tax preparation. But if you are one of those foolish enough to do both, you can have the Prep for Taxes will be able to send that over to Lacert or Pro Series or even Excel or your Pro Connect Tax Online to help in creation of those tax returns. One of the new things is that you can actually create adjustments that are non-posting, but you do want to have them affect the tax return, but not the book, right? So it could be a depreciation type of thing or something that is interest done on the tax return, but not in the book. So you can adjust them within the Prep for Taxes function without actually affecting the books. So with that, I wanted to toss it over to Chad and talk a little bit about, okay, these things are what we have available in or the QBO accountant side of the pool, but what if you need more, right? So what is Keeper and what does it do?
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Dan, again for the intro and for having us here today. Excited to share more about what's in Keeper versus what's in QBOA and the ways that Keeper is going to be able to help. To set the scene for everybody, our goal with Keeper is really to bring as much of that recurring bookkeeping and accounting work into one piece of software. So that way you don't have to jump between 3 or 4 apps just to close your client's books, dig between QBOA modules to find some of those valuable tools that QBO makes available and bring them all into one place. And so our focus is really in 4 different areas. The first being task management, where you can define that process that the team's going through each period, give yourself high-level visibility into understanding where the team's at all times. Secondly, we integrate directly with QBO to offer review tools that are going to automatically catch coding errors and flag other types of transactions that need to get cleaned up, similar to what a books review is doing in that transaction review section. Third, we have a secure and easy to access client portal to communicate with your clients on things like uncategorized transactions and document requests throughout the year. So you don't have to go back and forth via email all year long to get those answers. And then finally, we have a custom reporting module as well, where you're able to customize those management reports within Keeper, define and report on key metrics and KPIs to add additional value to those deliverables, and even include graphs and other visuals in those packages. So we're doing quite a bit here, but yeah, I'm happy to jump into each of these kind of focuses in a little bit greater detail, beginning with our client portal. I think this is one of the major attractions to Keeper for my firm, specifically related to the communication with clients on transactions that we need a little extra clarification on to understand where it needs to go. With Keeper's portal, because we integrate directly with QBO, we can flag those transactions within Keeper, push those to a client portal for the client to provide their responses in a timely manner. I know that QBOA does have a module where you're able to ask those client questions for that additional clarification. One of the pain points that we've experienced in the past, though, is that requires your clients to have an Intuit account. It requires them to log in with that Intuit account, and there's extra hoops for them to jump through. Keeper's portal is made secure by using what are called Google Magic Links. For clients to access the portal, all they have to do is click the links in the notifications that you're pushing to them from Keeper, and those links will take them to the portal, which is mobile friendly, as we see here in that screenshot, to begin responding to those requests and questions. So it makes that communication much easier than that back and forth via email or trying to use, at least in my experience, QBO's integrated version.
Yeah, that's a good call out, because what if they're a service-based type of industry where they're in front of a client and now they're either going to forget your request if they can't answer it right at that moment, or gosh, I got to now make sure I'm in the right app in order to address that. And Lord forbid, if I've got to upload something to that as well. And I have it on my phone available for that. This gives them the availability to do that.
Exactly. And many of us have used portals in the past, and we know that as soon as we introduce a portal that requires a username or a login or a special app for them to download, the clients would just rather email you instead. And with the Google Magic Links, it doesn't feel like that traditional portal experience because it is as easy as clicking those unique links to get into the portal and respond to those questions.
And on your screenshot there, you can have this white labeled to your fund, right? It looks like a client portal, but it's not.
Yeah, great call out there, Dan. Yeah, completely white labeled to match your firm. So your logo, your domain, your colors throughout. So your clients will never even know the Keeper name.
Nice.
And
all right. Task management.
I know that QuickBooks has started to include some task management functionality where you're able to start defining some of that process that you're going through for your clients. Keeper does that, but with a little bit greater, there's some more features here and some more customization. One of the big draws for me and my firm was the ability to look at a high-level client list dashboard like we see here in the screenshot that lists those clients on the left, lists those team members that are assigned to that particular engagement, and then out there to the right, an indication of the progress that the team's making as they progress through that work. So you know exactly where the team's at all times without needing to, again, either check in with that team member and say, where are you on client X, Y, and Z? You've got that high level visibility and transparency here from the dashboard. And you can even see those open items in the client portal that remain from this dashboard as well. So providing more transparency to know where the team's at all times. Right. And we can go to that next slide.
All right.
And this is where we start to talk about those integrated file review tools that I mentioned earlier. One of my favorites from QBOA that I mentioned earlier was the ability to identify transactions without payees, because it's only in the books review functionality that you were able to bulk or reassign payees within QBO. Keeper actually puts that tool front and center here, so you have that same ability to identify those transactions that have transactions without payees that have been coded into the ledger, bulk reassign those from within Keeper, and any changes made in Keeper get pushed back to QBO automatically. So Keeper's client list or client close page, which contains these different review tools that are going to flag those transactions that need attention, becomes the place where the team is doing that month or year-end review, simply addressing those different transactions that show up in Keeper's various review tools. So rather than manually scanning that general ledger to try and pick those out one by one, Keeper's got a whole host of review tools that are going to identify those types of transactions. And I mentioned the transactions without payees report as a similarity between QBOA and what Keeper offers. The one that we see in this screenshot is actually our expense inconsistency report, which is going to flag for your team any transactions that appear to be coded differently from how they've previously been recorded within the client file, indicating a potential coding error. So it makes it really easy for your team to see, okay, this has been coded inconsistently. We can see that it's been traditionally coded to advertising and marketing 100% of the time. Again, your team's able to make that change in Keeper, and that gets synced back to QBO automatically. So a lot of great tools there. And then finally, the financial reporting module. I mentioned earlier that we do have the ability to customize those financial reports within Keeper. Because we're integrated with QBO, we're pulling in that ledger data and providing the ability to customize those statements. My favorite piece of our reporting package is that executive summary that you see there in that screenshot, which is a great one-pager for those clients that are easily overwhelmed by a full set of financials, because it's going to hit those high notes quickly, but also give the team the ability to define and report on key metrics and KPIs that are relevant to that specific client as well, to add more value to those deliverables. So
it's color coded too. So
yeah,
green's good, red's bad.
Exactly, those visual cues that are going to resonate with your clients.
Yeah, your check engine light.
Yeah, exactly.
Please see the accountant for further explanation. All right, so you talked a little bit about the 1099. So let's talk a little bit about that and show it. Now, if anybody has of anything that high level that we had talked about, that you want to see, because Chad we'll be able to demonstrate. We do have a little bit of time for a Keeper demo. If you have something that you want to see a little bit more of, please put that in the chat so we can guide this for you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, great call out on the 1099s. For years, everyone has said that April is the worst month of the year for accountants, but in my experience, January kind of took that prize or that cake just because of all the pains associated with 1099s. And the pain is not so much the preparation of the form, but rather the identification of eligible vendors and the collection of those W-9s. And Keeper has a tool within the platform that's going to help the team to identify and assist with those two specific things. And I'd love to walk everyone through that right now and show how that's going to work.
Okay. I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And we haven't even talked about the payroll aspect of year end, which I think a lot of people, just like taxes, have run screaming from as far as payroll preparation. But that's another thing that adds to the January quagmire, I guess, is that is the best way to describe what happens in January, because not just the deadline for 1099s, but also W-2s and the 941s and those types of things that are also due on that day. So it does get quite challenging. And then on top of that, you have with the e-filing, there's a lead time that you have. So you don't have the deadline.
Right.
You have the deadline plus time for it to be processed.
Yeah. January's are absolute killers. I'll save the story, but 1099s put me in the hospital one year. So I'll share that at another time. But yeah, the pain is real. Just making sure, can you see the screen that says 1801 brands?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. So just to set the scene here, what we're looking at is the client close page, for example, client 1801 brands, specifically looking at that November period. And the close page is where the team will manage the majority of their client work in Keeper. This is where we'll define those tasks. This is where the team will be able to go through those transaction review tools like transactions without payees and make those changes here in Keeper. But down here in our payee entity review, we have what is my favorite review tool in Keeper, and it's that Prepare 1099s report that I referenced earlier. So again, this report is intended to help you identify potentially eligible vendors and then collect and organize that 1099 information. So that way you don't have to scramble those last couple of weeks of December, first couple of weeks of January. So to really drill in here and walk through what's happening within this report, Keeper is pulling in any client vendors that meet that year-to-date spend requirement that could trigger 1099 reporting requirements. So all year long, is when a vendor hits that $600 in year-to-date spend threshold, excluding credit card spend by default, Keeper's going to pull that vendor into this report along with any available vendor profile information that's already been saved in QBO. When that information gets pulled into this report, it makes it really easy for the team to identify when they're missing information related to that vendor. And if they are missing that information, you're able to actually request the W-9 through Keeper from your client through that client portal that I mentioned earlier, or from your client's vendor. If you make that request from your client's vendor for that W-9, they're going to get an email that's going to say, we're such and such accounting firm. We're preparing for year end. We need a copy of your W-9. They're going to have a link in that email that's going to take them again to a branded landing page like this. It's going to match your firm's logo. They're going to have the opportunity to upload that existing W-9 if they already have it filled out. Alternatively, they can fill out that form on screen, which is going to produce a signed PDF that your team's going to be able to reference back here in Keeper. And when that W-9 is received, oh, go ahead.
More importantly, it's not going to set them up with a self-employed version of QuickBooks, which was an unintended side effect of doing that through QuickBooks.
Yeah, good call. I forgot about that, but that was definitely part of the pains when we were trying to get those W-9s pre-Keeper. But when those W-9s are received, the team's going to be able to reference those on screen, update that vendor profile information based on what they see, check that important box that 1099 is going to be necessary, save it. And when that is saved, all of that information is then pushed to QBO back to that vendor profile So that way, all of that information is there at the end of the year when you go to prepare those 1099s.
Well, Chad, there was a couple questions about excluding the credit card spend. You have that, I see the check mark there.
Yep.
It's pulling from QuickBooks, these credit card spending. What is it looking for as far as what is a C-spend activity and what is not?
Yeah, great question. So the credit card spend that's getting excluded with this checkbox here is based on the chart of accounts. So when that account is set up as a credit card account, Keeper's excluding that spend from this year-to-date spend. Now, if you want to exclude additional transactions, maybe you have non-reportable transactions that are included in an account like cost of goods sold, you can specify those specific accounts that you want to exclude from that year-to-date spend calculation. So that way you're only pulling in to that year-to-date spend calculation what's going to be relevant and reportable. Further, you can drill into each vendor's transactions that are included in that year-to-date spend calculation and exclude individual transactions if you have or know of an exception for one reason or another. So there are a lot of ways to make sure that you're calculating that year-to-date spend correctly.
Right. I saw somebody mention like Zelle, right? That's a bank transfer, but it's maybe done a little differently. Would that be something that you would be able to do inside of the account restriction?
Yeah, good question. In a situation like that, and I can't remember exactly where Zelle falls with like the PayPals and the Venmos, and if they're issuing 1099.
We have 26 days for the government to change that on us as well. Anything we say today may not be the situation in 2024.
Got it. Yeah, always cutting it down to the wire. One of the things that we recently enabled here is the ability to exclude transactions based on check or reference number. So for debit card spend that is not reportable, if that memo or that check or reference is like debit, or maybe in the example of Zelle, add Zelle to that exclude list here. So that way those transactions are not included. So there are some options there to just make sure that you're pulling in that year-to-date spend that's going to be the most relevant and needs to be reported.
Yeah, those articles that I have posted about in the handouts, we'll talk about the specific ways to put the reference number in so that QuickBooks will exclude those payments. But now you can mirror that through Keeper if you're using Keeper.
Exactly. And then the last thing that I'll say on this tool is literally plug and play. So you connect a client to Keeper, and Keeper is going to produce this list for you. If you're thinking, I'm intrigued by what I've seen here today, I want to learn more, but I don't have the capacity to explore task management, file review tools, management reports, this is a great way to get started, especially this time of year. And we'll share some more information on how we can help get you started with free trials and additional demos to dive in further later on in the webinar.
And could you speak to a little bit about what Keeper's model is? Is it like a platform fee? Is it a per client fee? How does that typically work with Keeper?
Yeah, so our pricing is based on the number of clients in Keeper. So $10 US per connected client per month. There's
really breaking the bank there.
Yeah. Review tools, client portal, management reports, task management in one place. $10. Really affordable. And there's no like minimum number of clients required. You don't have to bring in your entire client portfolio. You have the option to choose which clients are going to be the most relevant for your firm to manage in Keeper.
And is it regardless of, because now the new offering of QB Ledger is an option in QBO. Is that something that Keeper can connect to as well?
It is. So we were very excited to hear about the announcement of QB Ledger, just because we have so many clients or users that have been trying to get on QuickBooks Online, but couldn't afford the subscription fees to do that. With QuickBooks Ledger, they can, and it does integrate with Keeper as well. So you get all of these benefits with the Ledger account as well.
Another question that was asked there, is it only pulling, stop sharing, and it changed my...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it only pulling in vendors with the tick box checked in QuickBooks, or all vendors over $600?
Got it. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll start sharing my screen again. So Keeper is pulling in all of those vendors, regardless of whether or not that tick box is checked, because many of us know that unchecked box doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't tell us that it's a C Corp that we've requested a W-9 3 years in a row. And so when that vendor's pulled into this report, it's going to get pulled in with a 1099 needed status of unknown. And if when you receive that W-9, you determine that, yes, it is a C Corp, we don't need that 1090 or that W-9 or that 1099 rather, you can filter that out by toggling that status from unknown to no. So that way, you know that that vendor doesn't need that 1099 in future years either.
Anything else that you want to show in the portal itself before you stop sharing it?
No, I think that was it for right now. I think that was a good intro, and I appreciate you letting me share my screen. Am I good to stop sharing? Okay, perfect.
Yep. And I stopped it for you. So there's some resources, right? So if you're watching on our stream platform, or if you're watching and you don't have the handout, you don't have the links, you can just whip out your phone and do one of these QR codes. We have for the ProAdvisor certification training, that'll take you to that. In School of Bookkeeping, we have a whole course on QBOA. Inside of that, there is a trial needed, but we have a 30-day free trial to be able to check that out and review that. And then also learning more about Keeper as well. All of those are QR codes or direct links there. Anything else that you guys have seen I already asked the last poll question, which I would have teed up right now, but since I was a little Zoom challenge, I guess is the best way to describe it. We already asked that poll question, but anything else that you want to wrap up on, Josh or Chad?
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
No, all I was going to say is thank you for having us on. Nothing else specific to the product, and I'll let Chad throw in some final words. But for everyone that joined, I just wanted to give a big shout out for listening in, learning more about our product. If you're interested in learning more and any questions that weren't answered, we'll follow up. We have some webinars coming up that I'm happy to share a link to. I know a lot of times people want to listen to customers that actually use the product, not just Chad and I, and happen to have a webinar coming up. And I think our customers do a better job of talking about Keeper and the benefits of Keeper than even Chad and I can.
That was probably the biggest moment for me when it came to what is Keeper in that area. Is Michelle and I went to the Appy Camp last year, and Keeper was a part of that. And I was just amazed of the people that were there were definitely promoters of Keeper, right? Ben, the CEO, didn't have to say much about his own product because there were 25% of the people that were there were already Keeper users, and they were ecstatic about the things that they could do. And that was a year ago. So you've got some improvements since then too.
Very strong advocate. Keeper, because it's so impressive and it's such a time saver and everything. It is definitely wonderful. So thank you guys for bringing it to our listeners because it is a huge time saver. And yeah, like Dan said, they couldn't speak highly enough about it. Ben just had to sit there and smile. He was like, this is great, because they would just sit there and just talk about how fabulous it was and how I wish I would have seen it years ago and how amazing and everything. So they would just sit there and just start talking and selling it with their story. So it was really amazing to hear them being such great advocates for it. So it is really impressive.
Well, thank you both again for having us on and letting us share a little bit about Keeper today. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. So thanks again for joining us. We do have some other questions that we can forward to the team, and you guys can follow up on to make sure that everybody gets their questions answered. But we hope you all have a great holiday, great year end. We might have another QB Power Hour before the end of the year, or we may have a replay of a more common or more popular one, because the next scheduled one is like the week before Christmas. So we might stay tuned for that. And we appreciate you joining us on the QB Power Hour. And we look forward to seeing you next time, whenever that is.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dan, for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the QB Power Hour podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Facebook group. You can find those resources and much more at qbpowerhour.com.